Good morning guys, and welcome to my unboxing and review of the Full Mechanics 1100 Gundam Aerial Permet Score 6 version. This is a 2024 premium Bandai exclusive release that I got for $49, which is actually cheaper than you can find the normal FM Aerial in a lot of the big online hobby stores. And that's mostly fair because this is pretty much just a recolor of the standard FM Aerial, of course with the Permet 6 version being shown off in the group duel against the Grassley House near the end of Season 1, which is I think the last fight the Aerial ever participated in before being upgraded to the Aerial rebuild. But the main difference in terms of the, I guess, color swap between the standard Aerial and this one is going to be the colors are all going to be, I think it's either desaturated or slightly blue shifted, I can't remember which, and all of the parts are going to have a more pearlescent finish to them, in addition to, of course, the shell units being changed from red to blue. So this is actually going to have a mostly standard style box art here with the Gundam Aerial here showing off all of its offensive capabilities here, flying around with its beam saber, with the beam rifle with the large beam blade coming out of it, and of course the gun bits all flying around, weapon display base not included. I do have a couple spare that I will be using to display this kit, so don't worry about that. And in addition, this kit does unfortunately come with standard sticker style decals, which is why I do have these water slide decals here from G Rework. And I think this is going to look really great on this kit alongside a gloss top coat combined with the more faded colors and the intended pearlescent finish of this kit. I think a gloss top coat will make this model really shine. So of course, like I was talking about earlier, this is going to have a standard style box art on the front. On the side, you will get more information on the Full Mechanics Aerial over here, talking about the Full Mechanics line in general, whose whole point is simplifying the internal construction of the kit while maintaining as much external detail as possible, which from the Full Mechanics kits I have built, the Raider and the Boost Raider, they have definitely succeeded on that front. But of course, talking about here that the shell units have been changed, and as you can see here, the shell units do have a bit of a glittery, shimmery effect to it, which should look really nice, especially after a glass top coat. And of course, we're talking about how there's like a multi-layered structure in them to replicate a feeling of depth inside the shell units. Of course, talking about articulation gimmicks in the feet and the knees, and talking about the versatility of the escutcheon with the gunned bits, being able to mount them onto the kit for the bit-on form. On the other side here, just some more images of the full painted build with a close-up there of the torso and head. Again, an image here showing off more of the Aerial's articulation in terms of a kneeling pose, and then here replicating the box art pose, of course without the gun bits flying around, which is shown up here. Again, talking about how you need a Witcher Mercury weapon display base, of which you need 2, and they are sold separately. In the US, they go for like $9 a piece, so a full $18 on top of this kit to actually show it off using its remote weaponry, which is a little unfortunate. So with that out of the way, inside the box, we will get 6 bags of runners, which it doesn't seem like a whole lot, but again, the Full Mechanics line is going to have a simplified inner frame, which will reduce its parts count compared to your typical master grade. And I did see a couple of really nice elements in there in some of the runners, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Of course, before that, we will be getting this standard style Full Mechanics manual here for the Aerial Permet Score 6. On the back here, pretty much just the same information we were seeing on the sides of the box. So the manual here, I don't know if all the Witcher Mercury kits do this. The only other P-Bandai Witcher Mercury kit I've built is the Lefrith pre-production type, and it also had this really weird manual where all of the text on the inside, instead of being black, was in this blue color, which was a little bit odd. But of course, we will get our parts list over here, which looks fairly simple, but the Aerial, while being somewhat busy in terms of surface detail, isn't too busy in terms of geometry or sculpt. So that is kind of to be expected, that it's not going to have an insane amount of parts like the Boost Raider. Like that kit had a crazy amount of runners. Of course, getting into the assembly here, starting with the arms. This looks fairly similar to something like the base Raider, where everything is fairly simple. Where they could get away with it, the frame is going to be a couple of parts sandwiched together, if the frame is included at all. And then the armor layers on quite nicely to give the detail necessary to make this indistinguishable from a master grade level of quality at a glance without knowing like the internal construction of this kit. And of course, fully assembling each of the arms there, our hands are going to be swappable finger style hands with the articulated thumb. And then we get into the torso here, which does look like it's going to have a really nice amount of parts layering complexity because of how geometrically busy the torso is. Then of course you get all this really nice layering to replicate the very varied look of the Aerial's torso there. Then of course you build up the backpack, which is fairly simple. And I'm pretty sure this is the shell unit here, so it does look like you are only going to be getting the option to display it as the Permet Score 6, which makes sense. I think for the standard FM Aerial, you do get the option to choose between either the like a standard like shell unit on or off look. At least I know the high grades did that. I'm not sure if the Full Mechanics did that. And then you get to your head here, which is fairly simple, but does look like it's going to build up to look quite nice. And then you get into your legs here. The feet do seem relatively involved to allow for that really nice articulation you were seeing on the side of the box, as well as replicating all the really nice layering seen on the feet. And then you get into the legs here, very similar to the arms in construction, a little bit more involved because of, well, the legs being naturally busier than the arms. Same thing for the left leg. Then you get into the waist here, which looks relatively simple. And then you assemble the full aerial there, and then you get into the weapons, starting with your escutcheon. All of the gunned bits are going to be relatively simple to assemble, as you might expect, but there are a lot of them, so this will take a decent amount of time. And of course, talking about building up the escutcheon shield itself, mounting it onto the forearm, and then getting into building up the beam rifle, which is just 2 parts that sandwich together, 1 part for the scope, and then being able to mount a couple of the gun bits onto the rifle for the enhanced rifle, and mounting the beam blade effect onto it. And then talking about the beam sabers, they're beam sabers, not much to say. And then talking about deconstructing the escutcheon there to mount it all onto the aerial for the bit-on form. And then, of course, talking about the adapters you will need to display them on the Witcher Mercury weapon display bases. And then we get our decal guide on the back here. Again, I will be using the G rework water slides instead of the included sticker style decals, because I think on the pearlescent finish like this, the standard sticker style decals will look pretty awful on them. And one thing I didn't notice is I didn't see a color guide anywhere in this manual, so I'm going to leaf through it really quick and see if I can find it, but if I can't, I'll let you know. Yeah, okay, there is just no color guide for this kit, presumably because of the pearlescent finish and all that, so a little bit of an odd choice. They do label the runner colors, like as you assemble the kit, with like generic colors, but they don't tell you like exactly how to reconstruct them with paint. Inside the bags, we will get 12 runners, which does seem about right for a slightly simpler full mechanics kit like this one, as well as, of course, this standard sticker style decal sheet. Like I said earlier, I will not be using these. I will be using the water slides from G Rework, but this is going to include your usual array of marking decals, stripes, the unit designation sticker over here for the aerial, and of course some markings for the holder, because of course Soletta is the holder in Universe. So yeah, just the usual fare for the decals here that will look really nice in water slide form. As for the runners themselves, so these runners were printed in July of 2024, and all of these are going to be the exact same runners included in the standard FM Aerial from 2022. So runner A here going to be a multicolor runner coming in 4 different colors. We will be getting a desaturated, slightly like faded blue here for the main accent tone of the aerial here, as opposed to the main kind of bolder blue seen on the standard FM Aerial for parts for things like the torso and some of the gunned bits. We will be getting a slightly desaturated green here for the eyes and head camera, a desaturated yellow here, and I don't know how we can see that, but there is a bit of a pearlescent injection finish to them. Again, I don't know how well it comes across on camera, but it does look fairly nice in person. This is mainly going to be for accent details for things like ventilation all across the kit, and of course we will be getting this like injection glitter clear blue for the shell units. So without the actual like metallic blue part underneath them for the shell unit, they do look pretty awful with just the glitter floating around in the clear part, but I think once it's fully layered up and fully assembled, it will look fantastic on the completed kit. Runner B here in white, and I don't know how you can see that. It's in a slightly off-white, and the parts are all a little bit shinier than they normally are. Again, going for that bit of a pearlescent finish once it hits Permet Score 6. This is going to be many parts for things like extra gun bits, parts for the torso, and you see all of our parts for the head over here, as well as the backs of the hands. Runners C1 and C2, with this major section shared between the two of them, going to be the rest of our pearlescent off-white parts here for the rest of the main armor tone of the kit, for parts for the arms, legs, etc. 2 of Runner D in a dark primer frame gray for many of the frame parts seen throughout the kit. For parts for things like the elbows and knees, we will be getting some of the, like, I guess, other ventilation detail. I don't know exactly what those are, like heat sinks or something. Very similar to the yellow parts, but just in this very dark primer frame gray. See parts for our shoulders here, some of the inner frame parts for the gun bits, etc. Runner E in that same dark primer frame gray for some more frame parts and weapon parts for this kit. You will get the main kind of frame body for the escutcheon shield, the 2 halves of the beam rifle that's sandwiched together, our hand option parts over here, as well as some more inner frame parts for things like our torso, our waist, and our head, as well as our action base adapter up here. Runners F1 and F2 in this desaturated red are going to be all of the red parts seen in this kit. The part not shared between them are going to be for, I believe, the torso and head, and the parts shared between them are mostly going to be for the feet. Runner F3 in this really nice plated metallic blue here for the actual like inside parts of the shell units. Like I was saying, this is going to be the main like draw of the shell units. Underneath the clear blue with the glitter injected in them, I think this is going to look really nice. So yeah, as you can see here, the finish on these does look fantastic. Runner G is going to be a single part in a clear yellow-green for the beam blade on the Aerial's beam rifle. And of course, we will be getting runner SB8 here for a set of 1/100 beam saber effect parts in clear yellow-green here. The main difference between this and the more standard SB1 is just going to be the shape of the actual effects themselves, where these are flat with a rectangular peg in the base, where the SB1 is more rounded with a round peg. So yeah, all of that does look fantastic and should build up to make a really nice, satisfying Aerial. So I'll see you after that build. All right, welcome back. Here is the Full Mechanics Gundam Aerial Permet Score 6 version, snap built, panel lined, decaled up with G rework water slide decals, and top coated with Mr. Hobby premium gloss top coat. And before I get started, yeah, this thing is absolutely gorgeous. I love how it looks. I love how it turned out. Definitely opt for the water slides if you decide to get an FM Aerial, not just the Permet Score 6 version, but also the normal version, just because so many of the decals were clearly designed to be like water slides first and foremost with how they're laid out and where they're placed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll talk about that more in the aesthetics section. So let's get right into the build. So the build for this kit is going to be very, I guess, kind of similar to the other two FM kits I've taken a look at on this channel, the FM Raider and the FM Boost Raider, but obviously are going to differ in a couple of key places, partially because, well, the Aerial doesn't really have a transformation mechanism, so some parts of it are noticeably simpler than those kits, but this is still a really nice model at the end of the day, and I think compared to the rest of the FM Raider that wasn't involved in the transformation, this kit is going to be more involved. I believe that's largely because more frame of the Aerial is visible, so they did have to include more of it, to the point where there are actually surprisingly few hollow gaps in this kit overall. It has a nearly complete inner frame, which is a really pleasant surprise, and this kit assembles and builds up really nicely. It's almost comparable to a more budget master grades, something like the wing master grades that are in the $40 price range or things like that. But the main difference, of course, between this and a master grade in terms of just like the build complexity is going to be the frame parts that are present. While there are a surprising amount of them, they are all going to be kind of simplified in that sections that would normally consist of multiple parts in a typical master grade are consolidated to be only one, maybe two parts that sandwiched together here, which definitely streamlines the building process and still looks fantastic once you fully assemble the kit with the frame that's exposed. All of it's really nicely detailed and builds up in a very satisfying way. In addition, this kit has a ton of undergating all across the board, so the slight pearlescent finish on many of the parts won't really be tarnished, at least on the visible areas, with nub marks. So even if you don't bother with like full nub cleanup with sanding and things like that, like many builders do, you can still get a really nice finished product because, well, many of the nub marks are going to be hidden for you, either through undergating or through kind of obscuring them on hidden edges or pegs or connector parts that aren't really going to be visible once the model is fully assembled. So the build overall is pretty fantastic. The only kind of down point I will mention is pay very close attention when you're actually building the kit. It may be because I was worrying about like keeping everything in frame on camera that I wasn't looking super closely on the manual. There were a couple of parts of alignment and joints in the torso that I did mess up, and that did mean I have to disassemble the torso again to get them realigned properly. And unfortunately, when you're disassembling the kit, many of the parts do feel really fragile, especially the shell units, and it felt very easy to break or damage them. So just pay attention and be careful while you build this kit, because if you have to take it apart, there are many parts in this kit that are either a pain to disassemble or are very fragile and very risky to do so without breaking anything. So that's just something to keep in mind while you build the kit. Just be cognizant of what you're doing and pay close attention to the manual for the orientation of parts. But yeah, overall, the build is fantastic. So getting it back to it here in the booth, talking about aesthetics now. As per usual, I will talk about color accuracy before I get into my opinions on this design, and as you saw in the unboxing section, I don't think I remember to make a note of it during that section. I just wasn't really paying attention to it, but there is no color correcting sticker sheet. Everything in this kit is color separated on the runner with no color correcting stickers necessary, and I'm happy to report that that also extends to the parts that you need to paint in yourself. There are none. This kit is entirely color accurate right out of the box, which combined with the undergating and smart nub placement that I was talking about earlier does mean that out of box, even without doing much to it, even if you met decals and all that, you will still have a gorgeous model at the end of your build, and it looks fantastic. So before I talk about my opinions on this design, I'm going to quickly talk about the decal thing I was talking about earlier. So as you saw in the unboxing, this kit does come with sticker style decals, which should look okay on the white parts, but there are a couple of them where the placement does make it really unfortunate that they're sticker style and will look horrible. The big offender is of course going to be this sticker here for the Aerial unit designation here on the shell unit on the backpack. With the sticker style decal going on a clear part, it the border around the actual text is going to look really obnoxious. And with how tight the space is to fit the decal, the edges are probably going to have to fold over this geometric lip, which will peel up over time and look really bad. There are additional decals like these here that are like broken pieces that go over a gap here, and with this gap, with this really nice panel line, the border of the sticker, again, the like negative space will be very apparent as discoloration going over the space, because a little bit of like air will be left underneath the decal and all that. So just the placement of the decals on this kit really does, like many other kits, indicate to me that they were designed clearly as water slides first and foremost, and you really need to get the water slides to make the most out of the decals. It's to the point where I would say if you decide to go with the sticker sheet that comes with this kit, or the standard FM Aerial, I would say just only stick the stickers that go on the white parts, not going over gaps, because the others I feel like would be kind of distracting to the point where putting them on actually like kind of cheapens the look of the model, where without them, the base model itself just looks amazing. So getting to my opinions on this design, I think, like I said at the very beginning, once I finished the build, this kit is absolutely gorgeous. Now, especially in the shell units, I was talking about earlier how in the unboxing section I was expecting this to look really nice, but if you look at the shell unit and like the chest here, the depth effect that happens with the clear part layering over the metallic part looks really nice. I was a little bit iffy on the injection glitter in the unboxing section, but I think it does complement the metallic blue actual like plated parts underneath the clear part very nicely, and it only really proves distracting if you look at it at a very specific angle where you can very clearly see the glitter floating in the clear part without the metallic blue behind it. But that's a very minor nitpick, and I think overall it is more than worth it for how much it enhances the overall look of the FM Aerial itself. It just looks great, and the metallic plating on the shell unit itself is much appreciated, especially compared to like the Witcher Mercury high grades. If you ever built those, they used a, I don't remember exactly what they called it, but it was a like very thick clear part on the runner that came with the actual like shell unit effects printed onto it, which looked really great on the finished model, but this blows that out of the water with the multiple parts and the metallic plated blue part underneath the clear part for the shell unit just looking fantastic overall. And I'm going to revisit a little bit of what I talked about on my video on the high grade Leo S, where the Aerial is very clearly a fairly unique main character design, where the mobile suit is opting for a much more feminine silhouette, but in a subtle way that really kind of enhances the uniqueness of this kit's geometry and all that. With things like the hourglass figure, the thicker thighs, and the more gentle, like I guess curvature of the geometry on this kit, it really makes the Aerial feel a little bit softer than many other mobile suits, even while it has all of this really nice geometric detail to still help it feel a little bit aggressive and edgy within the universe, which does add up to make this really interesting complete package aesthetically. And I also want to touch on really quickly, as you probably notice as this spins around, there are a ton of panel lining details all over this kit. If you like panel lining, you're going to love this kit, and I would really recommend you do so with all of these details. It really enhances the look of the Aerial with all of the geometry, with all of these different like kind of plates of armor modeled onto the kit through varied panel lines and geometry details and things like that. In particular, the torso with all of the kind of geometric layering of all the parts onto it makes this really kind of intricate, interesting, varied section of the model that looks fantastic, and you don't really see a whole lot in many different master grades. I think something like the Vidar and Barbados do exhibit it quite a bit, but if you're pretty much only used to building things like the After Colony or Universal Century master grades or 1/100 models, it's not really something you get to see all that often, and it really does help enhance the look of the Aerial on your shelf. Absolutely love the way this kit is modeled with all of the panel lines and geometric details and things, and once you panel line all of that, the full kind of potential of this kit really comes out. So yeah, this is definitely a kit I recommend you do like panel line and get water slides for, just to bring out its full potential, because it does look gorgeous at the end of the day. And I do think that I made the right choice in picking gloss top coat for this thing. I think with all of the gentle curves, and especially on the shell units and things like that, helping everything shine, it does really enhance what this kit is capable of. Although I do want to note that I did mess up one of the colors in the unboxing section. For the frame, it's not a very dark primer frame gray, it's actually a really dark injection gunmetal that I failed to notice under the lighting. So yeah, this also may be a kit that you would want to repaint partially. For the pale green in the eyes and the rear head camera, while it is color accurate, it doesn't necessarily pop all that much, so you may want to repaint that in a metallic green color. And for the frame, you may want to repaint that in a like proper metallic gunmetal color if the injection metallic gunmetal bothers you. I think it looks okay, and the subtle effect actually looks all right on it, but for some people that may bother them, they may want a full like proper metallic gunmetal paint job. But yeah, the Aerial aesthetically is perfectly color accurate, and I think this model looks fantastic in general. So for a quick size comparison, here is the full mechanics Aerial Permet Score 6, next to a standard sized high grade being the High Grade Blue Destiny Unit 1, and a standard sized master grade being the Master Grade Gym Sniper 2 White Dingo team. So as you can see, the Aerial, being an 18 meter tall mobile suit, will stand almost in line with your typical 18 meter tall master grade, but because of some proportional differences, I believe in probably like the lengthening of either the torso or the legs, this kit will stand slightly taller than your average 1/100 scale gunpla kit. Now this is of course just the base mobile suit itself. If you decide to display this kit with the gun bits kind of flying out, that will obviously take up a ton more space, and the escutcheon shield is rather large, so that will also take up quite a bit of space. So just keep that in mind when you're planning out how you want to display this kit. And for a quick visual comparison, just to illustrate what I was talking about earlier with the depth effect on the shell unit, here is of course the FM Aerial compared to the high grade Aerial rebuild. So design wise, of course, these two aren't entirely comparable, being different designs, but just mainly talking about the effect on the shell units here. Hopefully this can illustrate just how much nicer the effect on the FM Aerial looks, being two separate parts with that really nice illusion of depth, and the full metallic plated finish on the inner part really helping make the shell units stand out compared to those of the high grade Witcher Mercury kits. So yeah, this is a really nice effect, and I cannot state enough just how much I absolutely love how they look. In terms of your accessories, here is the FM Gundam Aerial Permet Score 6 with everything it comes with. So this is a fairly complete accessory spread for the Aerial here. Starting as usual with our hand options, these are of course going to be swappable finger style hands, so you will get the two closed fists you see on the kit right now. You will get this pair of standard holding hands for use with the beam sabers mounted on the backpack. You will get this trigger finger hand only for the right side for use with the beam rifle, and you will get this open expressive hand only for the left side for helping make poses feel a little bit more natural. For your adapters, you will of course get your standard action base adapter here, and it mounts on the underside of the Aerial. There is a little section here, I don't know how you can see that. There's a small section in the middle that can pop out and you can mount the action base adapter in its place. The connection's a bit tight, so it won't show off removing it here, but if you want to display the Aerial in the air, you can do so, and it is really nice that they do cover up what would normally be kind of a slightly undiegetic looking rail where the action base adapter would mount with that little part there. You will get to these two small adapters here for mounting two bit staves from the escutcheon, the two dark gray ones kind of near the bottom of the shield, onto the Witcher Mercury weapon display base. And you will get this adapter here for mounting the beam rifle to the back skirt. In terms of your melee weapons, you will of course get the two beam sabers stored in the backpack right here, which are very nicely detailed, as you can see, both geometrically and in terms of panel lines. So yeah, these do look quite nice for beam sabers. And for use with your beam sabers, you will of course get these two 1/100 scale beam saber effect parts, which in very typical Witcher Mercury fashion do use flat rectangular bases instead of the normal round ones, but apart from that, they're your standard 1/100 scale beam saber effect parts, so you will see them in the posing section. For your handheld range weapon, you will of course get the beam rifle here, which does look really nice. I do really like how the Aerial's beam rifle looks. Unfortunately though, the construction this is very simple, just being two parts that sandwiched together, one part for the front of this, like, I think it's supposed to be like a camera or something. It's just the same color as the rest of the beam rifle, so I'm not exactly sure, but this is a very simple weapon with no extra articulation or anything like that. You can mount the adapter to mount it onto the back skirt on either side of the beam rifle. Apart from that, not really much to say. Other than, of course, you can use this really large, impressive beam blade effect part with the beam rifle. It'll just slot in like so, and it does look great, so you'll see this in the posing section. And then, of course, you get the main accessory and gimmick of the Aerial, the escutcheon here. Being made up of 12-bit staves, this entire shield can't disassemble. You can mount all of the bits onto the Aerial for the bit-on form, or display them all separately using two Witcher Mercury weapon display bases to have them all flying around and supporting the Aerial or attacking alongside it, and it does look fantastic. Most of the time I spent decaling this kit was actually spent on the escutcheon with all of these tiny little stripes and parts all across the bit staves there, but I do think it really helps enhance the look and looks fantastic. Of course, the two dark gray, like kind of gunmetal parts here on the inside, like I just mentioned, can mount onto the beam rifle to make it into the enhanced beam rifle, so you'll see this in all of the different like configurations you can have the escutcheon in the posing section. So yeah, the Aerial comes with pretty much everything you would expect it to accessory-wise. Maybe a couple more hand options would be nice, with the option to have the beam rifle held in the left hand, and a second open expressive hand would be appreciated. But apart from that, I think you have enough variety, especially with the escutcheon shield, that you can have the Aerial doing pretty much anything you would want it to. So getting into articulation now, starting as usual with the head. For an upward look, you can get a slight upward tilt. You can get a very nice downward tilt, and the neck is on a hinge, which will do hinge things. You get very little side to side, basically nothing without like tilting the head down and forward, and of course you can 360 it about the ball joint. In the shoulder then, for a shoulder swing, you will get a fairly minor shoulder swing under 45 degrees. This like arc here on the shoulder can move up and down independently. There's a flap underneath it that can also move up and down independently. The shoulder armor itself can move down independently, and there's a joint in the torso to allow for this entire assembly to raise up. This will allow for just under a 135-degree arm raise, which is a little bit unfortunate. I was hoping with all of these extra joints that this would lead to a very nice upward arm raise, but it is above average but not exceptional. You will get full rotation in the upper bicep. You will also get a point of rotation in the forearm here, again 360, and this is to facilitate the elbow bend. So normally when the aerial looks kind of natural like this, you only get a 90-degree elbow bend. If you rotate the forearm to be more in line with like a more typical mobile suit, you can of course get a double joint that allows for a nearly 180-degree bend. The wrist is going to be on a ball joint, which will do ball joint things, and the thumb is also going to be on a ball joint. In the torso then, for a forward ab crunch, you will get a moderate ab crunch, but with all of this very geometry, you do get a lot of clashing geometrically in the lower torso, which prevents a more full ab crunch. For a backwards ab crunch, you get a very impressive backwards ab crunch. You get some fairly nice side to side crunch, and of course you can 360 the aerial in kind of the middle of its ab section around the ball joint. Of course, being a full mechanics model, there is not going to be a working cockpit hatch gimmick. In the backpack then, the beam saber holders can be tilted fully backwards or forwards, depending on how you want to pose the kit. If you want to pose it reaching for a beam saber, or just have it backwards like this to keep them out of the way, you can do that. In the waist then, the front skirts are on separate ball joints that can each raise up 90 degrees, and there is pretty much no side or back skirt armor to speak of. The side skirt armor is completely out of the way, not articulatable, and there is no back skirt armor. In the hips then, there is a hip swing mechanism to allow the legs to slide on a rail forward for better articulation. For your kicks then, for front kicks, you get over 90 degrees. For side kicks, you get 90 degrees. And for back kicks, by articulating the hip swing, you can get just under 90 degrees. You do get some rotation in the upper thigh. You get over 45 degrees out, almost 90 degrees. And you get a minor tilt inward of maybe 30 degrees. A double knee bend with a very nice armor slide gimmick does expose more frame as you fully bend the knee there, exposing more of this yellow part, exposing this inner plate here, and allowing for a full bend here before the heel collides with the thigh of nearly 180 degrees. Very impressive. The ankle armor is on a ball joint, which will do ball joint things that can swivel around like so. The foot does have multiple points of toe separation to allow for a very nice front tilt with a slight tilt on the frontmost section, allowing for some very natural kneeling poses, which you'll see in the posing section. For overall toe dips, you get a very nice toe dip. For overall toe raises, you do get a very far forward raise in addition to the front toe moving up, meaning that you can get the ankle in pretty much any kind of vertical position you would want upwards. You can, of course, 360 it about the ball joint. And for side-to-side tilt, you do get a almost 45-degree tilt to either side, but still fairly minor. I would also like to note that the heel on my Aerial's left foot does tend to pop off very easily. I don't know if that's a problem with this kit in general or just an error with the way I built this kit, but that is just something I want to make note of. You see, in general, the Aerial has fairly good articulation across the board, a little bit of an underwhelming shoulder swing, but not a deal breaker by any means. So you see that articulation in action in the posing section. So getting the FM Aerial Permet Score 6 into a spin, starting with the usual running and gunning pose, and this does show a few things. I actually do quite like how this looks. I think the naturalness of the leg articulation with the extreme amount of foot articulation and ankle articulation and the armor separation gimmicks in the knees does make any motion where the aerial's being dynamic with its legs look much more natural. And I think this pose really enhances the gentle curves of the aerial, and it gives it almost a sense of musculature and athleticism in its pose that isn't really apparent in many of the other poses you can pull off with this kit. So this actually does look surprisingly good, and it is kind of stable in this kind of pose. It did take quite a bit to actually get it balanced like this, but I'm pretty sure some of that is because of the glass top coat combined with the glass top of my rotating base, making Aerial a little bit more slippery than it normally is. So I think I'll chalk that up to the way I built the kit and not problems with the kit itself, because given the lack of super over-the-top proportions on this kit, it does balance pretty well most of the time. So yeah, again, chalk it up to a lack of friction from glass top coat plus glass surface. But Aerial does look quite good in this kind of pose, and I think the beam rifle, if you're going to use it without either the enhancement parts from two of the bit staves or with the beam blade effect on it, I think this kind of pose is where it really shines. Being a smaller, more compact weapon compared to some of the other beam rifles we've gotten in the past, it looks its best when the Aerial is in a kind of more nimble pose like this. And I think having the gun bits all kind of formed up as the escutcheon shield does look really great in these kinds of poses, and the very large surface area of it also makes it really practical as a defensive option, which you'll be seeing later. So yeah, just so much you can do with the bit staves and so much versatility of posing for the aerial, and it does look quite good in this, and I might consider having it in this kind of pose on the shelf, maybe in a few months in the future when I decide to repose this kit. So, of course, to cover all my bases, here is the aerial in a crouching pose, replicating one of the poses used in the promo material and things like that, where it's crouching and demonstrating all of the really nice foot articulation there, being actually fully balanced on the feet on the ground with that extreme upward toe bend, looking really nice, and with the open expressive palm with a pilot figure kind of lowering it onto the ground. Unfortunately, because this is a full mechanics kit, it does not come with a pilot figure of either Soletta or Miorine, so I grabbed the first 1/100 scale pilot figure I saw on the shelf, which happened to be Troa. So the aerial is here kind of lowering Troa onto the ground, and this does look surprisingly good. The aerial does look really natural in this kind of pose, again with the extreme articulation in the feet and ankles, allowing for it to actually have both feet planted on the ground when it's in this kind of in-between kneeling and crouching pose. Does look really natural, and does look quite good holding the pilot figure in its hand. In addition, the aerial is here in its bit-on form, which I think does look really good and bulks up the aerial in all of the right ways to help it look a little bit more, I guess, complete without all of those hard points being exposed, fully covered up by the gunned bits. So I do think the aerial looks really cool in the bit-on form, and if you don't feel like shelling out the $18 that you need to if you're in the States, if you want to display the gun bits all flying around on the Witcher Mercury weapon display stand, I think the bit-on form is a fine way to display the aerial. The two giant lower parts of the shield coming onto the back skirt does feel a little bit awkward in terms of getting it to look okay in certain poses, but apart from that, I think the bits really enhance the look of the aerial, make it look more complete. So yeah, this also is something I would consider having this kit do on the shelf, just for how natural the aerial looks in this kind of pose. And of course, getting the aerial into the air, here it is directing all of the gunned bits to fly out and attack with the escutcheon disassembled, and the rifle equipped with the large beam blade, which does look really impressive, and it was actually kind of a minor miracle I was able to get it to fit in my photo booth while having it spin around, but this is really the FM aerial at its most impressive, and if you really want to get the most out of this kit, you're going to want to spend the $18 to pick up those two Witcher Mercury weapon display bases, because like many other kits that have remote weaponry, it looks all the more impressive with the remote weaponry fully deployed. And the aerial also looks great in the air. Many of the Witcher Mercury designs were very clearly designed to be kind of like flying through space most of the times, and the aerial is no exception. While in universe it did struggle quite a bit without the Mirasol flight pack, in our world in terms of how it looks as Gunpla, it does look really great in the air, in addition to how good it looks in its running and crouching poses that you saw earlier. In this aerial pose, this is where the aerial really shines, no pun intended, especially with that open expressive hand kind of giving a visual indicator that's directing the gunned bits to attack. You can also do very dynamic things with the aerial alongside the gun bits if you want to have it charging forward with the beam blade, or like you'll see in a pose in the conclusion section, if you want to have it retreating backwards and firing the enhanced beam rifle downwards while the gunned bits cover it. That's also a really dynamic and interesting way to display the aerial. So yeah, a pose like this really does bring out the best of what the aerial can do, and if you're willing to spend the extra money to get the action base for the aerial and the weapon display bases for all of the gunned bits, you're left with a really special display that does look fantastic, really pops on your shelf, and in my opinion is plenty centerpiece worthy, especially with the enhanced depth effects of the shell units compared to something like the high grade. And of course, here is the aerial charging forward with the escutcheon in shield form, kind of covering itself with the large defensive area of the actual shield itself being quite large, wielding the beam saber in its hand as it charges forward to deliver a slash. So I'm not really going to speak much on this because it's a beam saber charging pose. I think many kits are capable of pulling this off, and this is just to show you what the aerial would look like wielding the beam sabers. In addition, you see here the beam rifle mounted on the backpack, which does look a little bit awkward in my opinion. I'm not really the biggest fan of the way it hangs there, so I'm probably not going to display the aerial with the beam rifle on the backpack, but if you like the way it looks, more power to you. So I'll leave this spinning up while I talk about the conclusion. So in conclusion, the Full Mechanics Gundam Aerial is a fantastic model kit that succeeds on nearly all fronts. It builds up great, looks great, includes pretty much everything you could want to pose this kit doing, and articulates amazingly to allow for a very wide array of poses. In terms of the build, this kit is still a full mechanics kit at the end of the day. It does fall short a little bit of what you would expect from a typical master grade, missing some inner frame parts and missing some gimmicks such as a movable cockpit hatch gimmick, but the way this kit builds up is fantastic, and with the design exposing more inner frame than many other designs, much more inner frame is included in this kit than many of the other full mechanics model kits, which does lead to this feeling almost like a budget master grade in terms of the kind of execution of this model, which makes it feel very high quality, especially for the price compared to the other full mechanics kits, and all builds up in a very stable way with the armor all layering on in a very satisfying manner that makes this kit feel, again, very premium and just a joy to build, so it really succeeds on that front. In terms of aesthetics, this is where the Aerial Permet Score 6 really does shine, and this is the main reason why you're going to want to get this version over the standard one, being if you like the kind of color shift and finish changes of the Permet Score 6 version. Of course, speaking just to the base FM Aerial, this kit is entirely color accurate out of box, no stickers required, which means that out of box with the very smart nub placement of this kit and with perfect color accuracy, even just as a straight build, this is going to be a gorgeous kit that you can have look good without needing to put in much extra effort at all. If you really want this kit to shine, I would recommend grabbing water slides and top coating this kit just because of the way some of the decals are placed, either going over gaps or on clear parts. The sticker style decals included in the base kit will look pretty bad over those details, but even without the details, this is still a really gorgeous looking model kit. And as for the color changes compared to the standard FM Aerial, of course this is going to be a slightly color shifted version, being desaturated across the board, and the parts all have this injection, almost metallic pearlescent finish across many of the parts, but it's most visible on the pale blue and yellow parts where it has that kind of pearlescent finish that looks really great with a gloss top coat. In addition, the shell units have been reworked. I don't know if the base FM Aerial had the injection glitter in the clear parts. You can let me know in the comments because I don't own that kit, but the clear parts here do have an injection glitter in them, which on top of the metallic plated blue parts of the inner shell unit layers up to give this really incredible depth effect that looks amazing on the kit, and as you saw earlier, especially when compared to the high grade, really does make this kit feel extremely premium and very high quality. So yeah, aesthetically it is just a joy to look at. In terms of accessories then, this kit comes with nearly everything you would expect it to. It comes with a decent range of hand options, although it would be nice to see the open expressive hands and trigger finger hands duplicated on either side, because currently you can only have it holding the beam rifle in the right hand and you can only have it having an open expressive hand in the left hand. So having a little bit more variety would be nice, but apart from that, this kit comes with essentially everything you would expect it to. Sword, board, beam rifle, with the board here being the main gimmick of the kit, with the escutcheon being able to be split up into its 11-bit staves and wielded in a number of different ways, either combined as the large impressive escutcheon shield for defensive purposes, for the bit on form if you want to bulk up your aerial and give it a bit more of a complete silhouette, or to have displayed kind of flying all around the aerial in an all-out offensive attack for a very impressive display. This kit comes with essentially everything you could ever want to have this kit doing anything you would want it to. So yeah, this kit is very complete in terms of accessory spread, only missing some hand options. Although it would have been nice for them to include the weapon display bases with this kit, especially for the special P-Bandai release. I really feel like they should have included some of the bases for a limited release like this. But anyway, getting into articulation then, this kit also pretty much succeeds on that front entirely, with great articulation across the board. It's a little bit lackluster in certain areas, like the shoulder swing and the forward ab crunch being a little bit lackluster, although I did realize that I wasn't fully articulating it in the articulation section, and it is a little bit more impressive than what I showed off, which you should be seeing in a little bit if you aren't seeing it now. But articulation is excellent and does allow for pretty much any pose you would want, especially on the ground with that really great ankle and foot articulation combined with the armor slide gimmicks in the knees really makes the aerial look natural when it really has to bend its legs and put weight on it. It does really feel like a grounded kit with an almost like organic look to it, with the way everything flexes and bends while this kit is on the ground, which does look really interesting and does enhance many of the poses you can pull off with this kit. So would I recommend this kit? Unlike many of the other kits on this channel where I will normally open with a disclaimer that if you don't like the design, you can probably skip out on it and not miss much, this is going to be an exception to that. I feel like everyone should pick up an FM Aerial just to see what it's about, because this is truly an excellent kit that succeeds on all fronts. Again, like I said at the beginning of the conclusion, it builds great, looks great, is a full complete package that comes with pretty much every accessory you would want, and poses great. So what more is there to want with this kit? It is such a unique and interesting addition to like the 1/100 I guess, scale of Gunpla that I feel like you're really missing out if you don't decide to pick this up or the standard FM Aerial. Really, this recommendation applies to both, and whether or not you want to hunt for the PS6 version, I'll leave up to you, because that is entirely like visual personal preference, and the two kits otherwise are completely identical. So yeah, this is an excellent kit, and if you don't have one, you should really try and pick one up. I think it got reprinted fairly recently. I know it was hard to find this kit for a while, but I remember seeing it on New Type at least a couple of weeks ago in stock, no problem. I don't know if it's in stock now, but regardless, if you can find this kit, make sure to pick it up because it is simply a joy to work with. So that was my review of the Full Mechanics Gundam Aerial Permet Score 6. What do you think of this kit? Let me know in the comments below. If you like reviews like these, make sure to sub and hit notification bell so you don't miss future uploads. If you like this video, give it a like, and I will see you next time with my review of the high-grade VF31J Siegfried Hayate Immelmann Custom. I'll see you then.